Alright, so welcome to part 3 of Dominion Seaside, What's in the Box. We only have a few more cards left in this expansion to go over. There's only 8 cards in this expansion that cost 5, and that's it. And that's it for the whole What's in the Box video. So, let's get started. So the first one is the Tactician, and it's definitely a pretty cool card. It's another one of those awesome duration cards, too. If you have at least one card in your hand, discard your hand. And at the start of your next turn, you get 5 cards. A plus buy and a plus action. That is powerful. So, let's say you have a horrible turn. Let's say you have, like, 3 estates in your hand and you have 2 coppers. Or should I say, let's say you have 3 estates and you have a copper in your hand, but you also have this card in your hand. I would discard your entire hand, so that way on your next turn you have 10 cards in your hand probably, a couple of actions, and a couple of extra buys. That is definitely awesome card, and it would definitely help out with a powerful turn. And if you had a really good hand with a bunch of action cards that gave you extra actions, as well as some extra money, you could potentially still have a fair buy, like maybe buy a silver or something, and then still discard your entire hand with some extra money lying around, and buy a silver this turn, and then the next turn have a powerful turn. So it's definitely tactical for sure of when to actually play it. There are definitely times when you wouldn't play it, for sure. Like if you had 4 golds in your hand with this card, would it be worth it? No way. So, you know. Alright, then we have the Explorer. Another card I absolutely hate. And then we have the Ghost Ship. Now, another card that's sort of vague, you know? I mean, technically, if somebody out in the ocean abandoned their ship, and a bunch of the sailors abandoned their ship, and the ship was just, you know, floating around in the ocean with nobody on it, you could technically call that a ghost ship. Just like when people abandon a town in real life, it's called a ghost town. So technically, for some reason, if a ship was abandoned, you would call that a ghost ship anyways. So it's sort of another one of those vague cards. Plus, even though it does look a little creepy, you know, with the storm and everything brewing on it, it's still hard to determine whether or not it's really supposed to be what it is. I certainly don't see any ghosts floating around, do you? I certainly don't. But it does definitely look creepy. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a ghost ship, and so, it's definitely not a ghost ship in my eyes anyways. So, since it's sort of a vague card, I went ahead and kept that as well. And it's definitely a very powerful attack card for sure. And it's just like Militia, except a whole lot worse than Militia. You're probably thinking, well, how can it be worse than Militia? Well, let's go over it, shall we? Okay. So you get plus 2 cards, and then each other player with 4 or more cards in hand puts cards from their hand onto their deck until they have 3 cards in hand. So here's the thing. Usually when Militia hits you, you'd be like, oh, I just discard a couple of estates. So what? That didn't really hurt me. However, if this was the attack instead, you'd be putting those estates back onto your deck. So you'd be, well, back to square one for your next turn, basically. So definitely more powerful than the Militia, because now you have to be like, oh, is it worth it? Maybe, maybe not. So, it just depends. And then, of course, if your turn is to help you draw a few extra cards in your turn, and you put those estates back on top, then you'd be drawing those estates again, which, obviously wouldn't really be helping you out too much. So, definitely worse than the Militia for an attack card for sure. And it's definitely pretty fun to play with if you like attack cards. Now, then we have the Bazaar, and it's another one of those action-y like actions that are similar to villages, except just not in name is it called a village. And so you get a card, you get 2 actions, and you get a treasure. So that's really, really cool. I like this card a lot too. It's definitely fun. And then we have the Merchant Ship. And then we have the Treasury. And the Treasury is kind of interesting. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, well, maybe it should be a treasure card. There are such a thing as alternative treasure cards. So I was very surprised that this was an action and not a treasure card. But if it was a treasure card, then this whole extra paragraph here wouldn't really work with it. So what do you do? What do you get with it? Well, you get a card, you get an action, and you get a treasure. And certainly the action part and the card part wouldn't be very useful if it was just a treasure card. But when you discard this from play, if you didn't buy a victory card this turn, you may put this onto your deck. So that's why I say it still wouldn't work very well if it was a treasure card, because then it would be just like putting a copper back onto your deck, which isn't very useful. But in this way, you're putting an action card on top of your deck that gives you a card, gives you an action, and gives you a treasure. That's really cool. If you have a bunch of these in play, you could keep putting them back on top of your deck, and if you had 5 in your deck and you eventually played them all in one turn and you still didn't buy a victory card, on your next turn you'd be drawing 5 extra cards and you'd have 5 extra treasure and 5 extra actions technically. So you just keep stacking up on actions. That could be very powerful. But of course, once you buy a victory card, like a province for instance, then all of the cards would go back into the discard pile. But still, that is a very powerful card for sure. And then we have Outpost, and this is actually probably my second most favorite card in this expansion. And there are definitely times when I wouldn't play it, but usually for not, I will play it. And so if this is the first time you played an Outpost this turn, so you can't really stack these to make it worth your while, and the previous turn wasn't yours, so you wouldn't be able to play an Outpost in your second turn, then take an extra turn after this one, and you only draw 3 cards for your next hand. So, let's say you play this during your first turn. You know, you normally everyone gets a turn, and then it's the next person's turn. With the Outpost, it's actually giving you a whole nother turn before the next player goes. So, you play this on your first turn. The next turn, you're going to have a hand of just 3 cards instead of 5. Is that worth it? Maybe. You could get some really good cards that would allow you to have a powerful turn. It's possible. But then also is possible is you'll have an extra turn and it won't really do anything for you at all because all you get is a couple of coppers and a victory card, which really doesn't do you much good. But the whole extra turn could potentially give you a powerful extra turn. And so instead of having one powerful turn in it, you could have easily 2 powerful turns, maybe, possibly, before the next person goes. So that's really cool. But it does prevent you from stacking this whole idea of Outpost. So you wouldn't be able to play it the second turn and get a third turn. You just couldn't do that. Plus, you couldn't throne room this card or Keen's Court it from that matter in order to maybe have 5 turns before the next person goes. So that does prevent that from happening either way you look at it. But the whole extra turn is pretty cool. I like that. And you could potentially, like I say, potentially have a very powerful second turn. For sure. It is possible. So, or if anything, sometimes I've had, like, you know, I won't have a very strong hand, but I'll have 1 attack card in the second turn, and it'll give me an extra chance to attack my opponents. I didn't really get a huge benefit for attacking them, but I got to attack them again. Is that worth it? If Lighthouse isn't in the game, it is, for sure. Alright, and then we have the Wharf, and this one is also pretty cool too. Now, and at the start of your next turn, you get 2 cards and a plus buy. So that's pretty cool. You get two cards now and an extra buy now. And then on your next turn, you get, well, instead of 5 cards, you'd get 7. And an extra buy. That's pretty cool. For sure. And that's basically all we have for Dominion Seaside. That's all of the cards. So we have 2 costing cards. And we have 6 3 costing cards, it looks like. And we have 8 4 costing cards. And we have 8 5 costing cards in this expansion. And that's it. That's all we have for this video. I hope you guys liked what's in the box for Seaside. It's definitely a pretty cool expansion, even if it's not really high on my favorite list. It is definitely a lot of fun to play with. And there are, you know, a few cards in here I didn't like, you know, like the Explorer I didn't like, and I didn't like Navigator either, and I did not like Lookout either. So there's really only 3 cards in the expansion I really absolutely hated, and I don't like playing with. I don't even really buy. And there have been times where I've played Lookout, and it was useful at times, and then other times it completely destroyed me. And so this is like a lot harder to control than... you can easily get carried away with rats from Dark Ages expansion, but I think this one could be potentially worse, because it makes you trash a card, it makes you discard one of them, and then put the other one back on top of your deck. So you don't even get to keep one of the cards for your turn. You're just trashing a lot of cards and discarding a lot of cards, and that's about it. And so, like, let's say you had 3 golds in your hand and you played this, or let's say you revealed the top 3 cards with this card to look at, and they were all golds. You'd have to trash a gold. You'd have to discard a gold. So is that worth it? No way. And that's the thing. If you don't know what's coming, well, you know what they say? Look out. For sure. So that's it for Seaside Expansion. I hope you guys liked this video. Leave a comment and a like if you liked it. And, you know, you can always subscribe too. That'd be nice. All right. Bye.